We'll let a few people get on here before we get started. Maybe nobody will show up. It doesn't matter to me. Still gonna make this video. This is a post by another gentleman I found interesting. I only read a little bit of it. I haven't read the entirety of it, but I'm going to read the entirety of it on here. One, for my purposes of re-listening to it, and two, to help you guys out. There may be some things within this transcript that I don't agree with, and then again there may be things that I agree with and that are lacking, and I may be able to provide extra information on. This young man's been at this purportedly for about 5 months, and I'm pretty impressed so far with what I've been reading. He must have been doing some excruciating studying to evolve to this point in as little as 5 months. I think he's got a pretty good grasp of what's going on, just based upon what I've read so far. And so I decided to make a Facebook video about it. So let's get into it. When born, your parents sign a birth certificate and a Social Security papers, and just so you're fully informed, the Social Security Administration is actually a subsidiary corporation of the International Monetary Fund. Okay, so let's understand what everything is. And again, he's only 5 months into this, but he did really well. So when born, you have a place of nativity. Your parents sign the birth certificate. Your mother is the informant, of course. And the state registrar is the chief probate officer. Okay, many people don't actually know that. They just call him the state registrar. They don't realize how much power the state registrar has. They're the chief probate officer. Okay, and so the birth certificate is manifested from the original application, which is not in this writ, but I'm going to elaborate on it for my viewing in the future. And if you guys enjoy it, great. So the original application, the original security that manifests the birth certificate into existence, is actually created by your mother. Although they provide the form, your mother is in fact the one who fills it out. And she is known as the informant, but she also made a special trust deposit with the hospital administrator and hospital staff that whisked it away and gave her nothing in return, which manifests a trust. That a trust can be manifested in many ways, but in this instance, this is how a trust was created. It's a factual event that occurred. Your mother gave something of value to these people, and they gave her nothing in return. Okay. And that original application, that master application, is a security. And to prove it, if you go into the hospital anytime soon, you can even just go in there and say, you know, one of my family members is going to have a baby and we need an application to get everything started so we're ahead of the curve. She's worried about not having all the I's dotted and T's crossed and doesn't want to do it in the pandemonium of bringing a new soul into this world, right? And they'll give you one, and you can look at that form, and it will have a series of numbers at the top right-hand corner, sometimes in the lower left-hand corner. So that document is actually an application, if you will, or a security, and can be securitized. The probate officer then gets a hold of this information, and they pervert the name, because at first on the application it's last name, first, middle, and then when you get the birth certificate, it's first, middle, last. Okay, so it's not what your mother had created. It's the opposite of what your mother had created. So it's a whole new thing. And to prove my point in my theory on this is the fact that if you go to the Secretary of State, let's just say I want to register Derek Chaton Gonzalez, and the next time that I send a document to the Secretary of State, instead of saying Derek Chaton Gonzalez, I just call it Derek S. Gonzalez. The Secretary of State will refuse it because the law is very specific, okay? Which means everything must be the same all the way through. The IMF functions the same as the state registrar, who's a head probate officer. Everything must align just right. That puzzle piece must fit perfectly as it was designed, and anything to the contrary will not be admitted, okay? So mother signs the birth certificate as the informant. She creates the master application. She gives it to the hospital administrator and hospital staff. She gave them something of value. They gave her nothing back in return. That manifests a trust. And Social Security papers. Again, the Social Security is an administration underneath the IMF, which opens a Sesta KV trust of your full name in all capital letters. This name is found on all your credit cards, bills, loans, etc. Take a look if you don't believe me. This all caps version of your name is a trust and is not you at all. Okay, and this young man is spot on about that. It isn't you. It's never been about you. You make it about you when you falsify a record believing that it is you. Okay, and that Roman maxim of law that I always throw at you guys, let he who wishes to be ignorant remain ignorant. There's a lot of truth to that. Sesta KV is French for he who lives, and was used in medieval times as a way for farmers to handle their farms when traveling. Someone could produce on their farm while they were gone. Essentially, it was a glorified contract. There were two catastrophes in England in 1965, and then there were law changes in how these trusts work in 1966. Well, he forgot the important part, and I'm not critiquing his work by any means. I just want to add to it because he's doing a wonderful job. In 1302 is when the first trust was created. Then you had the palpables of 1455 and 1745 and so on and so forth. You have these trilogies of palpables. So the first trust was actually created by the Vatican. Okay, and this comes. Then 1665 and 1666 happens with the burning of England in the Black Plague. Okay, and that's what constituted these people coming together at midnight on some nefarious evening and deciding they were going to pass the Sesta KV Act. Okay, and I've had lawyers tell me, well, this Sesta KV Act doesn't affect us here in America. That's foreign law. No. Everything runs through three principal corporations. You got the United States, Washington, D.C., you got the Roman Vatican, and you got the London Crown. All right, pay attention because this is very important. These changes open the door for a kind of fraud I will explain in this write-up. Your name as a trust, for example, Brandon Joe Williams, is located in Puerto Rico. A trust is defined. Before we go into Puerto Rico, let's talk about where the actual birth certificate, the actual instrument of value is warehoused. Now, you can be born in any of the 50 states. Don't give a shit which one it was. The original certificate always goes to Washington, D.C. Always. All you get from Vital Records is a certified copy of the original instrument with new numbers, okay? A trust is defined as legal relationship in which one party holds a title to property while another party has the entitlement to the beneficial use of that property. We're talking about the doctrine of merger here, or the separation between legal and equitable, okay? Entitlement to the beneficial use of the property. Essentially, sort of a glorified contract. Trusts are amazing, and this I agree with, and have a lot of interesting things you can learn about. But for the sake of this post, we will only cover the two major aspects only: trustee and the beneficiary. Well, you can't really just talk about the two only. You have to talk about the grantor, because it's the grantor, trustee, and beneficiary. Those are the three parties to a trust, okay? Now, people say, well, Derek, I've done my studies in the grantor settler. The grantor doesn't always have to be the settler, and the grantor settler don't always have to be in the same man or person, okay? So, to put it bluntly, there are three parties to a trust: grantor, beneficiary, and trustee. And under the doctrine of merger, when you merge legal and equitable title together in the same person, in one person, you collapse the trust, and that person there and then becomes grantee absolute. Okay? So I don't know if he's going to go into that, but I want to bust that out for you guys. All right. Two major aspects only, trustee and beneficiary. The trustee is the one who is basically working to keep the trust working and going, whereas the beneficiary simply benefits from the exchange and does not have a direct hand in the operation of the trust. All actions in life are technically trust actions. Every second of every day by your reading this post, I am the trustee and you are the beneficiary. My job is to ensure you are going to benefit greatly by reading it, and I need to fix it if you aren't. So, for example, when you have an encounter with a police officer, because they are the public servant, then they are the trustee and you are the beneficiary, which I'll get into more later in this post. All court cases, all interactions with other humans, all letters or communications are all trust actions. All of life is a series of trust actions. Someone is always the trustee and the other is always the beneficiary. And if that law of God is violated at any point, then the particular interaction will fall apart in flames. May I explain certain areas of your life? We'll be talking a lot about trust in this post. A reverse trust scam is when someone like a court or a police officer acts as though you are the trustee and they are the beneficiary, such as in writing you an improper ticket, and a ticket is really a security instrument, okay? And what he's talking about is beneficiary by proxy. When an agency comes in and acts as a beneficiary, they're really beneficiary by proxy and you're trustee by proxy until you reverse the polarity and let them know who you are, okay? The prosecuting attorney that comes into the courtroom is always proclaiming to be the beneficiary or acting at least in the capacity of being on the side of the beneficiary in his best interest, because the beneficiary is not yet known yet, Judge. We don't know who this man is over here. He's come in as surety, fine, it's all great. He doesn't understand subrogation. We're going to run our game on him, but we haven't identified the beneficiary yet. And because of that, I'm here in the best interest of the trust at first he'll be acting as a trustee on the best interest of the trust, but at the end, he will come in as a proxy beneficiary, okay? And that's what they're doing in their private ad hoc courts. I will cover how to handle this with ease later in this post. For now, let's get back to the subject of your all caps name trust. In the United States Manual of Styles, it says a name that is in all capital letters is either an acronym, corporation, or a trust, okay? So they identify that there. That dog Latin, that all capital letters, is identified in the government styles manual. I keep telling you guys that when they create legislation and stuff, they always have to go by a manual in order to give it substance for which they can create or draft their artful coloration of how it should be, right? Legal conventions since Roman times mandate that living people must be described or denoted in all small letter names, okay? Under Roman civil law, they only lose that status when they become debtors, at which point a free man partially loses his status and is named using upper and lowercase style conventions. Slaves are named using all capital letters. Here's the exact quote where they also define a trust as a corporation. I know this is a bit confusing, but it's like this on purpose. Corporations shall be deemed to include any company, trust, so-called Massachusetts trust, or association, incorporated or unincorporated, which is organized to carry on business for its own profit or that of its own members. 15 USCA, United States Code Annotated, Section 44. We'll also find that in USC Code as well. The reason why this is important is because the trusts themselves are Roman trusts. Remember, all roads lead to Rome, and they operate using Roman civil law. So this is a 2,000-year-old trust technology being used. As per common law, human law, or the law of God, Natural law, man's law. In order for there to be a crime, there must be a victim. But in statutory law, corporate law, admiralty, you don't have to have a victim to have a crime. Speeding tickets, drug possession, etc. Plus, in common law, the state cannot be the victim. Whereas in corporate law, the state can be the victim. Okay, we're talking about different jurisdictions here. He's not really he's articulating it in the means of the different aspects of it, but he's not telling you exactly what it is. That's admiralty law, the law of the sea, the law of shipping vessels and so forth, and then God's law, natural law, your right to face your accuser, so on and so forth. The Social Security Trust, all caps name, is what is used to transfer a person's rights away from the Constitution and common law. In our current court system, the Constitution does not apply at all. Some of you may have experienced this, more than just some. The body of information containing corporate law is called the Uniform Commercial Code. This is so they can run their private ad hoc for-profit corporations while masquerading around as government. That's why we do the 4506A, the 13909, and a few other forms, including the 211, okay? Otherwise known as the UCC. I'll get into this more later. The true way to spell a human name, and it should be the name of a man because hue is the color of man, right? It's not man. Name is like this, and it's Brandon Joe Williams with the full stop in there and a period at the end. The name is in all lowercase. It's first name, middle name, last name, okay? And we find this to be true when we start studying the Bible biblically. We find that all the names were always written in lowercase. There's no capital letters in Hebrew. It's all lowercase. The all caps name is essentially what is used to pull you into a corporate jurisdiction of our current court system by them saying your name or putting it on paper in all caps, and by you responding to it. All right. Now, there's the doctrine of idiom sonum. I don't know if he's going to talk about it, because that's all the further I read before I decided I was going to make this video. Under the doctrine of idiom sonum, if it looks the same, it sounds the same, then they're allowed to presume and assume that it is the same. You must rebut and rebuke the doctrine of idiom sonum, okay? You tacitly consent to be the corporation trust, thus placing you in the jurisdiction of the corporate law. They use your name as a trust corporation, then your tacit consent of not knowing their game to yank you into their jurisdiction. This is very true. This is exactly what they're doing, okay? So, you don't understand what's going on here today. There's a matter before the court. I believe a mistake has been made. I am the beneficiary. The beneficiary is known. Who's the trustee bringing forward the securities to resolve this matter? There are no facts in dispute. I waive all benefits without God. Where's the trustee at? Which one of you is the trustee? And you watch, everyone's going to go, I don't want to be the trustee. Because the whole game in the court is to pass that hot potato of liability, okay? Because whoever's caught being the trustee has the responsibility of paying the transfer taxes on a carryover basis because they're in constructive possession of decedent estate property, or cedent estate property, however you want to say it. It don't matter to me, okay? That's the facts, okay? The word jurisdiction is an important word in law, probably the most important word. It means the right of a court to hear a particular case based on the scope of its authority over the type of case and the parties to the case. It comes from diction, which is to speak, and juris, which means law. It is essentially the boundaries of authority of a court, police officer, judge, etc. Now, police officer, judge, and court, those are all entities, okay? Those are all titles. They don't really exist. Have you ever heard a judge say, well, the court finds, and I look at him like he's a dumb motherfucker. You got imaginary friends at the age of fucking 55, dude? What the, are you off your rocker? Right? Okay? So you got to be cognizant of the games that they're playing with spelling, all right? I talk to men, and men are responsible for being moral and having a good moral compass and knowing the difference between right and wrong. Statutory law does not apply to you and I. It may apply to the corporate construction and bylaw and everything else, but it does not apply to you and I as men and women. I have been studying trust law in detail, and I have a great book on this subject. If you would like to know more. 3. In the world of corporate law, your human rights no longer exist or are applicable. For example, the Constitution. You are a fictional organization trust, and your rights fall under the UCC, not the Constitution. The UCC can be manipulated at will to suit their needs. Now, I've been studying this stuff for a long time. And I'm here to tell you right now, about the time I thought I had it figured out, I would go back into the UCC and it would have been revised, and all of a sudden there were certain things that were repealed, there were other things that had been moved. For example, Title 12, 95A was moved to Title 50, 4305B2. Title 12 deals with banking, and Title 50, 4305B2 is the military code, okay? So you got to ask yourself, why was it moved? Now, if you go look at Title 12, USC 95A, it will just say repealed. It doesn't tell you that it was moved and placed in Title 50. So if you're not reading all this stuff constantly, they're constantly shifting it and moving it, and it's always fluid to keep people confused, okay? Thankfully, we have a lot of great researchers out there that as soon as something is moved or whatever, they're on it and they find it, all right? For example, in the DMM manual, the domestic mail manual, they tried to remove zip exempt and a number of other things in that manual. They're still there, okay? You become a slave. They make money on fines, so they keep adding new types of fines in order to continually make more money. The war on drugs, for example, is nothing more than a very lucrative private corporate campaign masked as government to make money on fines, which explains why the war just got bigger and bigger. Not to mention the fact that they actually fly in the controlled substances. The CIA's been caught for it. The military's all been caught for it. Billy Clinton was running a damn airport down there in Arkansas, shipping in all kinds of drugs and kids and everything else, all right? So they create these things so they can profit from it. Not only do they create the problem, they provide the purported solution, and then they privatize prisons so they can even indulge themselves even more in unjust enrichment, all right? In the corporate law world, your all caps name is accurately property, is actually property. It's called a franchise. So you are, when you tacitly consent, property. How this whole scam even became possible stems from a redefining of the word person, okay? Most of you guys know this stuff, but we're going to go over it again. They redefined the word person. That occurred around the same time that the 14th Amendment was ratified. As far as I can tell, there's not solid evidence that enough states actually even voted to ratify the 14th Amendment. What are you doing? Saying my computer is acting up. Where did it go? There we are. 14th Amendment. The word person means more than human being. Human being actually means monster by the definition of the Black's Law. All right, it's man. And it doesn't actually include man. Person in the legal realm does not mean man, okay? It can also mean corporation or trust. So if you sign a document with the word person used to describe you or anyone else, and your name is in all caps in the document, you are tacitly consenting to possibly being a non-living corporation or trust that does not have rights such as the Constitution. Now, I'm going to stop it right there because he's got this a little bungled up, okay? You will always be a man. And for you women, you will always be women, okay? I don't give a fuck if you think you're a fucking penguin. If you reach down between your legs and you got flaps or a set of testicles, that identifies who you are. Not only does that identify who you are, what you are, when you're dead and gone, 500 years has elapsed, I can dig up your bones, draw your bone marrow from your fucking bones, and I can still identify what fucking gender you were without your skin being on your bones, okay? So it's not necessarily the fact you got testicles or a vagina, but the fact remains, even 500 years from now, I can identify exactly what the fuck you were gender speaking, okay? Gender specific. So a man never loses his rights. What a man does is enter into a contract, never really realizing what he's doing, but ignorance of the law excuses no one, including all of you, whether you believe you're a fucking penguin, a dolphin, whatever. If you sign that dotted line and you are not keen as to what's going on in Admiralty and you are not restricting your endorsement, you become the liable party, period. All right? And if you don't believe me, go into a bank sometime and restrict your endorsement, sign a fucking loan, and watch the conniption fit they fucking have. It might slide past the teller. It might slide past the bank manager, but as it gets higher up the chain, somebody will be contacting you going, he can't sign like that. Call him up and get him down here now. He has to sign this a certain way. I will remind you guys, there is no law that requires you to sign anything a specific way. Okay, you can sign it however you want. Mark, signet, seal. You can put a dot on there for all I care. It still counts as a mark, signet, seal, period. Okay, moving on, because we kind of expressed the person thing. Person covers individual, partnership, joint business venture, corporation, trust. Okay, it doesn't have anything to do with fucking man. Person has absolutely nil in admiralty or in trust law to do with man. Person is never a man, okay? And in fact, the only place you're going to find man is in the United States Code, Title 7. And you will find man in, I believe it's 136, if my recollection serves me right, dealing with hairy mammals, okay? Hairy mammals, and it says man. I once gave an opportunity for people to find man within the code, and I was offering like something like $1,000 or $2,000, and Mr. Anonymous laughed. He goes, if I'd ever heard that, I'd have taken $2,000 from you in a fucking heartbeat, kid, because it's there. And I was like, what? And he goes, yeah, we got talking about agricultural liens, and he showed me where it was, and I was like, that's freaking awesome. At first he was like, go find it yourself. You know, that's what any good mentor would do. Go find it for yourself, and if you can't find it, and we'll talk about it later. Anyway, long story short, man is in the code. It's also in the military manuals, 2 or 3 different places that it actually says man, but that's in the military manuals. So we'll keep going on. We covered person. All right, Church of Scientology versus Department of Justice, 612 F2D 417 at 425 1979. The word person in legal terminology is perceived as a general word which normally includes in its scope a variety of entities. Okay, when they're describing something specifically, anything that is not included is naturally excluded. Period. End of fucking story. So when they say entities, you are not an entity. You are a man, mind, body, spirit, and soul. Period. Okay? You are a man. You are not an entity. You never have been an entity. An entity would be something like a trust, a partnership, a joint business venture, a corporation. Those are entities. All right? You are a living being, a soul. You have a brain that functions. All right? You're in a multi-dimensional realm. Whereas everything that they're talking about here is one-dimensional. Other than human beings, see, ergo, 1 USC subsection para 1. As property, the state can then do whatever they want and violate your rights without any repercussions. Okay? If you act a certain way, they can do this to you, but at any time you can put your foot down and stop it. All right? When you're participating with it out of your willful ignorance, they're going to get away with running roughshod over you. When you finally stand up and say, whoa, 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 I'm a man. Where did you get jurisdiction over I as a man? All that stuff stops. I'm the beneficiary. Beneficiary is now known. This constructive trust was created to benefit I. All right? So let's make all the parties whole, zero out the ledgering on the accounts, close the accounts receivable and the accounts payable, and let's get to the annuities and futures that you guys generated by hijacking, otherwise being involved in identity theft, to manifest these securities into play, right? Because that's what they're doing. You are not human any longer. you're always going to be a man. You may not be a human because a human defines a beast, okay? It's part man, part beast. It's the color of man, okay? You're not a color. You're not black. You're not green. You're not yellow. You're not red. These are colors, okay? You may be melanated or have less melanin in your skin, but you're not a fucking color. You are a man, okay? You're a living sentient being and soul, all right? You're not a human being any longer through tacit consent and agreement. An entirely different set of rules comes into play, and you are now stuck inside of a game where you don't know the rules. Well, in part, he's kind of correct on this. What actually really happens is the fact that you pledge yourself as surety. It's not that you're not a man anymore, but you're acting in a certain capacity that lends to the fact that you have now consented to be the liable party. Does that make sense? I hope so. So it's not that you're no longer a man. It's not that you just don't understand the game that you're in. Okay. And by being surety, by not saying, hey, you know what? I ain't got no problem being your surety. Shit. I'll be the surety so long as my right of subrogation is not trifled with, trampled on. In fact, I grant the name to the court for my future interest in tort based upon the fact that I'm coming in as surety, and my right to be availed must be upheld as subrogation. Okay? This is trust, when you get into trust. Okay. You have literally as many rights as a box does that is being shipped by Amazon. There are ways to avoid and change all this and pull yourself out of the jurisdiction of corporate statutory law. This includes most policing. Policing laws as well as taxes. At this point, the only laws that apply to you are common law laws, which are essentially don't hurt people or their property. Basically what he's trying to convey to you is the proper way to convey the common law is do not trespass. Do not trespass against anybody. Don't touch them. Don't take their shit. That's a trespass that results in a tort action at the common law. Okay? It's a common law claim known as tort for trespass that caused a man harm, damage, loss. All right? So my rights stop where yours begin. And I think the best way to illustrate that is so long as my fist does not touch your nose when I swing it, and I haven't violated your rights. I may have encroached upon your space, but I haven't violated your rights yet. Okay? No harm, damage, and loss has come of it yet. But the second that my fist makes contact with your nose, we now have a breach of trust. Okay? Because we're all entrusted to keep our hands and our feet to ourselves and not touch shit that doesn't belong to us. And don't steal from or swindle people. All the statutes and complexity that you are used to seeing no longer applies to you. You are a foreign entity. Well, you're not a foreign entity. You have foreign sovereign political power. Okay, and the reason why is you are foreign to the District of Columbia. Okay, you are foreign to the corporate laws. You are foreign to admiralty jurisdiction. Okay, you have to contract into that stuff, and you are completely foreign to it. Man created the word sovereignty, by the way. And you can never really be the true sovereign, because if you believe in a creator, then he who creates is the ultimate sovereign. And so you exhibit sovereignty, right? So if man created government, then government is obedient to man. But they're not government anymore, okay? You gotta go to the Reconstruction Act of 1871 and you start to realize what they really did. The corporate law and now need to give consent and jurisdiction to be pulled back into it. This is commonly known as a sovereign citizen. Okay, oxymoron. I'm not going to get into it. I think you guys are all well aware of that. But that is actually just a hit piece term, as the term itself is an oxymoron. Sovereign means king, while citizen means a person owing loyalty to and entitled by birth or naturalization to the protection of a state or nation. The term sovereign citizen in itself implies jurisdiction. The correct term would be state national, or simply sovereign. A sovereign is a foreigner to federal government and the tax authorities. True sovereigns are officially classified by tax authorities as a non-resident alien. Okay, again, these are titles. Non-resident alien is a title. I'm just a man. Show me in your code where your codes apply to I as a man. They can't do it. Can't be done. Okay? Because they don't have jurisdiction over things they did not create. That's so important fundamentally for people to comprehend. Okay? The term sovereign comes from the idea that God gave us the land and no man has the full right of ownership. That's correct. We are stewards on the land, okay? And the fact is that we have dominion. We have dominion as stewards to take care of it for the future generations, right? And do the good works of our Heavenly Father. If you'll notice when reading that good book, it does not say, and God said, let Joe Bummer, crack pipe smoking son of a bitch, run this land. It never says that in the Bible, all right? It doesn't say let government rule the earth. It doesn't say that at all, okay? And this is where the churches get it wrong, because when you're in church, the pastor will read, you are to obey a God-fearing, you are to obey the government, but they leave out the fact that it actually says God-fearing government. And in my lifetime, I have never seen one government that fears God. They all run around like mini demigods, thinking they rule the roost, okay? It's a bunch of foxes in the hen house. Pay attention. Those churches are recognized by the governments of the world because they needed some balance. If it's not balanced, eventually that pendulum just comes off, right? So the church came in to give balance, to give people a voice, and to live through their faith and believe that God will come down here and do the righteous thing eventually, which may undoubtedly happen at some point. But the truth be told is, the only reason you have 508c1As and 501c3s is because they agree not to talk shit about the establishment. Because back in the day, when Rome was up and flourishing, and the Vatican came along and beat their chest and said, hey, we need a piece of this pie in here, the Vatican said, so long as you keep the people from revolting against us, we'll allow you to exist. Otherwise, our army will quash you like a bug. Okay? And then later on, if you study the history, you start to realize that eventually the Vatican had its own fucking army. And it started to tell Rome, hey, you guys are going to help us on our conquest because we've been helping you. And we're going to go out and spread our religion throughout the world. We're going to conquer. And they agreed. Okay, because it was mutually beneficial for both parties. This is just a business venture, ladies and gentlemen. Real cut and clear when you start to study the history. Land is essentially common ownership for the benefit of the people. God is the trustee. We are the beneficiaries. I think he's got it wrong on that. All right. The beneficiary is Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ became the beneficiary when he fulfilled his duties from the grantor. See, Jesus wasn't sent down here to save us. No. God created an inequity in us. We're a perpetual conflict of interest. We lust after the skin, even though spiritually we know what we're doing is wrong. Okay? So we're a perpetual conflict of interest. And in equity, if you create a problem, you must provide the remedy. So he who provides the ends provides the means. And in order to save all the souls, he had to send something down that Satan couldn't replicate, right? And Satan couldn't replicate his only begotten son, okay, who had a purpose here. And it wasn't to save us. It was to correct the mistake that God had made when creating us, making us a perpetual conflict of interest and giving us a path to God through Jesus, all right? People go, well, Derek, why do you pay attention to the Bible? Because it teaches you trust. And where do you think the Vatican decided to create the palpables for the first trust man has ever seen created by man? It came from the Bible. No different than how the Constitution does not give us rights, but is nothing more than a communication of God-given rights. Again, God is the trustee. We are the beneficiaries, and no human man can change or alter that agreement. The Constitution and that agreement that he's talking about is a covenant. Okay, a covenant is another very, very important word. You don't often hear it expressed in trust law, They talk about grantor, grantee, but a covenant is a compact. It's a trust relationship. And that's how it's expressed in the Bible. There is a covenant that has been extended to all of us, should you accept it. The Constitution is a communication of our natural state and an organization and listing of that of which we are entitled just for being alive. It is put in writing the gifts bestowed on us by God. Now, you got some problems with that. The Constitution really was implemented by a group of people who had been oppressed, okay? And during that time period of being oppressed, they realized certain things needed to be written down because history naturally repeats itself, all right? And there were just some fundamental basics that needed to be written down. Because of the Constitution, as he states here, was bestowed upon us by God, that Constitution would have been so incredibly lengthy, not even funny, okay? Because there is no right to, your right to masticate, masturbate, breathe, defecate, urinate, none of that was written, right? And that's where, when you see the Article 1, Section 9, the enumerated and the unenumerated. See, the Founding Fathers were very sharp. They knew that they didn't have the patience and the time to write everything down that you have a right to, okay? The rest of it was left for you to decide. But the basic elements were there: the right to bear arms, the freedom of religion, the freedom of press, the freedom of speech. Okay, the basic elements were put in place. So cognitively, as generations evolved and we slowly started to repeat history, somebody along the way would be like, Eureka, I got an idea. Guess what? You can't stop me from breathing. It's not written in the Constitution. It's not written on paper. It's not written anywhere else. But I know that you can't stop me from doing that, or it would be a trespass, causing I a harm, right? We'll go on. 1829 U.S. Supreme Court case. Now, the Supreme Court is not authorized to create law. The legislator is not authorized to create law. Congress creates the law, okay? As far as the law is concerned throughout the United States, Congress makes the law. Legislators create policy, provisions, acts, different things. But they don't create fucking law. That's an egregious misconception. Just like the U.S. Supreme Court making this thing called case law. Case law is not law. It's merely the opinion of another fucking man. And who knows? Maybe on that day he agrees with certain principles and doctrines, and on other days he completely goes against sound doctrines and principles. And another thing to look at is, when a Supreme Court case is evaluated, you have a number of justices sitting on a bench. It's almost unheard of that they ever agree on everything, okay? So if you can't even get 8, 9 Supreme Court justices to agree on one fucking topic, what say you? Is it law? No, it's not. So, but we're going to get into it anyway, because the Supreme Court is held with this image of upholding the law of the land. So in Lansing versus Smith, which I may or may not agree with this, we'll just see. People of the state are entitled to all rights which formerly belonged to the king. Well, fuck the king, because you know what? The king didn't have all the rights in the first place, right? And by his prerogative, okay? Well, let me ask you this. Did the king ever create you? No, he didn't. Was the king created by God? Sure, most certainly. The man, not the title. The man was created by God, who later absorbed a title, a prestigious title that everybody's, oh, this is great, he's the king. Why do you think the Founding Fathers pushed so hard to get rid of titles of nobility? Because these titles seemingly have a way of causing people to look differently upon their fellow brothers and sisters, as though somehow they're holier than thou, or they're better than you. I tell you right now, everybody sins, everybody has bad thoughts. Some people punch, fight, and fuck. Other people knit, crochet, and drink in the closet. Okay, everybody's a fucking sinner. Ain't none of you free from that shit, all right? It's part of the reason I speak like I do, because you shouldn't be ashamed of it, but you should at least take recognition of it. None of us are fucking perfect. So people of the state are entitled to all rights which formerly belonged to the king by his prerogative. Okay? Ownership of land would technically be agreement of usage only, because God is always the trustee. Well, God is always going to be the grantor. The grantor. Okay? When the trustee and the beneficiary are in the same person under the doctrine of merger, which is what Jesus Christ did for the Heavenly Father, and that's why the grantor bestowed upon Jesus Christ trustee and beneficiary in one. Jesus is now in control of the heavens and the earth. They were a gift to him for fulfilling his obligation, okay? But in terms of true ownership, it would be a matter of knowing that God is the true owner and you are a renter only to God, no one else. You can technically own property, okay? Well, there's a difference between land, property, and real estate. Real estate and property are something man created, okay? You got tangible, you got intangible property, you got movable property. I mean, there's all kinds of property in real estate, all right? But land is something our Heavenly Father created, and that is something the government doesn't have the right to dictate over, okay? You can technically own a property. You can never own a property. The fact remains that you will always be a tenant on property. Why? Because it's a construct of government, period. You can't own property, okay? Not in the sense of real estate and property as far as land. You can't own it. Property are rights, rights are property. Without one, you can't have the other. I get it. But in this context, you can't own fucking property. Not in the way of real estate, okay? You will always be a tenant or a joint tenancy deed or a trust deed, a warranty deed. It will never, ever, 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 ever say that you're the owner. First and foremost, because they're using the all caps name. So they perverted and converted your good name into an all caps name, so you don't even own that shit, all right? You can technically own a property outright, but it's not like you think it is. Once you pay off your mortgage, there are still several steps you have to go through to truly own your property. First of all, you'll never own the property that he's talking about. I thought he was going towards real estate and property, so let me explain this. You can call forward a land patent and get your allodial title, okay, an allodium. But versus feudalism, which is what we have with the property real estate. You have feudalism because you were just a tenant, and anytime the government or the agencies masquerading as government decide that you haven't paid your taxes to the king, then they can remove you from it. Be damned if you paid off the note or not. It doesn't fucking matter. So that's feudalism, ladies and gentlemen. That's not allodial. That's not allodium, okay? The only way that you can remove the real estate and property is to package up that nice, pretty address that they have attached to it and move that motherfucker to a P.O. box. P.O. box. You want to know how you do that? You take the all caps name that's on the warranty deed, the joint tenancy deed, the grant deed, and you get an assumed business name for it. And then you take that name along with the lot, block, parcel ID number, zone improvement project number, easements, and you put them in the fucking P.O. box. You move them all over to a P.O. box, and then you notify the municipality that you have removed their lot, block, parcel ID number, zone improvement project number, real estate from your land. That's how you do that, okay? And abracadabra, poof, it's gone. Just like that. Moving on. Once you gain true ownership of the property, you no longer are required to pay real estate taxes, okay? Because the country no longer holds any deed. You have never registered with them or begged for a benefit or contracted. Thus, they have no grounds for requesting tax reciprocation. Once you truly own your own property, once you truly own the land, hold it in trust on behalf of the Heavenly Father, right? You also become immune to all laws, permits, policies coming on you, police coming on the land, not the property. They'll always have a right to the easement, property. If you don't remove that lot, block, parcel ID number, zone improvement project number, and address from your land, they can always walk on that. So he's fatally flawed in this, but he's getting there. I'm very impressed with him only being at this for 5 months. He's doing really good, but I want to provide some clarity there because I know this is fact. Etc. I'll explain this more later. Supreme Court Jones versus Timmer, 89 Ave Superior Court, 1226. The Privileges and Immunities Clause of the 14th Amendment protect very few rights because it neither incorporates the Bill of Rights nor protects all rights of individual citizens. Instead, this provision protects only those rights peculiar to being a citizen of the federal government. It does not protect those rights which relate to the state citizenship. 1818 U.S. versus Bevins, 16 U.S. 336 establishes two separate jurisdictions within the United States of America. 1, federal zone, and 2, the 50 states, or the Union of States. If you are born inside one of the 50 states, and there's really only 48, okay, that's a whole nother story. Hawaii is actually sovereign unto itself. It's got its own fucking people. It was part of a military occupation and hostile takeover to combat the Japanese attack and war and all that other shit. And then Russia was a purchase agreement, and the people that were on the land now known as Alaska, there were Eskimos, right? There were native people there as well. So technically, Alaska was part of a purchase agreement. Whether or not we ever paid the debt, or the United States, quote unquote, ever paid the fucking debt for it, who fucking knows? But there's technically only 48 states. The moment you come out of the womb, you are considered a state national. You have a place of nativity of the state you were born in, okay? So each state, a union state, each one of the 50 states is actually a union state. So instead of like state of Nebraska, it's actually just Nebraska. And it was his own country, period. And Nebraska is probably a piss poor example because it's part of the Louisiana Purchase. There's a whole diabolical fucking deal of bullshit there. But like Arizona, one of the last states to join the Union, it articulated its metes and bounds in Article 1, Section 1, one of the most brilliant things they did. And because they were one of the last ones to join the Union of States, they had seen what everybody else had done, and their first constitution they ever created was so fucking good, the federal government rejected it. They rejected it because they said, whoa, you didn't give us an in. We need an in. We want to be able to extend you some federal funding down the road and stuff. But if you keep it this way, well, then you're not going to be able to benefit from anything that we're doing here, because we're constructing something greater than ourselves. And we're going to stir away from the constitutions and the republics, and we're going to implement this new system. So Arizona changed up their initial constitution, and they revised it so the federal government would accept it, so that they would accept it in Washington, D.C. We'll move on here. So there's a difference between Arizona and the state of Arizona. Two separate entities. Dissimilar things should not be joined, and similar is definitely not fucking same. Identical twins, although they appear to be the same, I can guarantee if you're dating one and you sleep with the other, you're going to have a really bad day. That should go to show you that similar is not fucking same. Okay? So, first of all, when you're born, you have a place of nativity. You're born onto a country unto itself. It's got its own constitution. It's got its own, which a constitution is a charter. It's a way that debt is moved from one entity to another. That's the very definition of a constitutor, okay? So this is all commercial. The moment you come out of the womb, you are considered a state national of the state you were born in. There are particular statutes at large that state that no private contract can violate, negate, or mitigate your state national status. So, if you were born in one of the 50 states, you were already a state national. Congrats. So, that's expressed in the Government Styles Manual, page 95, chapter 5, like 2.24, 24.25 or something like that. Anyway, where it goes into identifying, like if you're in Indiana and you were born in Indiana, for example, or on the land of Indiana, you are considered a Hoosier, and Arizona is considered an Arizonan, right? Anyway, that's how they identify it. Then you become a U.S. citizen when your parents sign your Social Security and birth certificate. That is an egregious misnomer. You don't become a U.S. citizen. The U.S. citizen is a person, period. It's a 14th Amendment citizen. It does belong to the government. You are the beneficiary of that person that was created. See, people don't articulate that shit to people. The Social Security card is a fucking person. The application for you to go to school creates another fucking person, okay? These are all persons that are created. You will always and forever be a fucking man. So, didn't create the U.S. citizen. The U.S. citizen was created through the probate, which created the estate, because you can't have a trust without an estate. There must always be an estate in place before a trust can ever be manifested into existence. What created the estate, what created that U.S. citizen, was that original application your mother filled out at the fucking hospital, okay? And the Social Security person created after that is also a U.S. citizen. It's a U.S. person, okay? The driver's license that you run around with in your pocket is not your driver's license. It's not yours. It's not yours. It's the estate's property. And you don't believe me? Read the back of the motherfucker, and it will tell you. If you find this, send to the state of, okay? So, which proves it ain't yours, because if it was yours, they'd tell you, send it to that address over there. It ain't yours, okay? It's a cloak or a condom so you can engage in commerce. That's all it is. But all those persons that are manifested are U.S. persons. They're not you as the man. So, personams. What commerce actually allows people to do is do things that morally would be unconscionable. That's why for so long they said, I'm just doing my job. You know, they know morally what they're doing is wrong, like stealing kids, CPS employees stealing kids. It's fucking wrong. To see these women and the dads out in the streets crying their eyes out while they have civil servants stand by as though it's some lawful fucking operation while they deny them due process of fucking law based upon unsubstantiated, unsworn fucking statements is inevitably fucking wrong. It's wrong. Period. And they say, well, Derek, what about the kids that really need that? Well, then if you follow fucking due process of law, we wouldn't have that issue. But when you incentivize this bullshit for federal funding, now I have a fucking problem with it. You've incentivized people to steal other people's property under the guise that it's in the best interest of the child. Meanwhile, it's alienation of affection. You are denying the grandmother, the mother, the uncle, the father, everybody in that family to bond with that little one, okay? And their right to freedom of religion is now destroyed because they have family values that have been brought from 10 generations back. And they want to instill those same qualities and values into their offspring, but are now being denied. So it's a violation of the First Amendment. It's a violation of the Fourth Amendment. It's a violation of the Fifth Amendment. It's a violation of the Sixth Amendment. Okay? All these things I'll be talking about in a class coming up. Anyway, before I get too much further into this, let's see what else this gentleman has to say. Again, I didn't read it all before I started reading it to you, but I read the first few of them, and I really liked where he was going with it. Then you become a U.S. citizen. You never become a U.S. citizen. You might act in the capacity of a U.S. citizen, but you are always going to be a man. When your parents sign your Social Security and birth certificate documents at birth, okay, first of all, they signed it. Where did you have, when were you cognitive? When did you enter into that contract? You fucking didn't, all right? So this hyperbole of, you are a U.S. citizen because your mom and dad signed paperwork is bullshit. Get that fucking shit out of your fucking head. I don't know who's teaching that shit, but it's wrong. You are not a man until you're cognitive and capable of handling your fucking affairs. Back in the 17 and 1800s, I'm going to tell you this right now, 7 and 8 year old kids were very, very articulate and very, very intelligent. Most of which were all homeschooled, by the way, okay? And they were taught how to survive and drink fresh water and all that other great stuff, right? Nowadays, we've become lazy and lackadaisical, and we've allowed a public fool system to educate us, and we wander around like babbling idiots in Babylon, babbling, okay? So this is the kind of babble that I want to prevent. I think the young man is doing a great job of articulating this, but he's egregiously incorrect on you being a U.S. citizen. It is impossible to be a fucking title. So let me put it into perspective for you. I have people all the time that call me that say, the sheriff caused me harm.
The state trooper caused me harm. The governor has caused me harm. The board of directors have caused me harm. That is an incorrect statement. It's a fallacy. You are stating a claim for which relief cannot be granted because it is impossible for a title to cause you harm. Now, if you say that man Derek, who at times acts as a governor, has caused me harm, now we're talking. Now I can understand what you're saying, all right? Now you're showing me in what capacity he's operating, and you're identifying the man who knowingly, willingly, and intelligently violated his oath of office and caused you harm by some action that he did in a capacity as governor. The governor is a U.S. person. The man is always going to be a fucking man, period. So that man caused me harm, not the sheriff. The sheriff is a title. The title cannot cause you harm, okay? That's a one-dimensional idea. It's nothing further than that. So when we get to talking about making claims against men and women specifically, because everything attributes to about 4 factors: excise taxes, securities, excise taxes and securities are the 2 main ones. When you're paying with a Federal Reserve note, you're just paying an excise tax, and the proof of that is the receipt. The receipt is the title, okay? The title of the goods, the bill of sale, the title, and you have constructive possession of it. Everything attributes to an excise tax. So everything's an excise tax and securities. That's how the world works, period. It's in a nutshell. That's why the UCC is so important. Tacitly consenting to being placed in their jurisdiction. This could be a tax form, DMV form, passport form, etc. In that aspect, he's technically correct. When you fill out these forms, but you're not restricting your endorsement, doing a qualified endorsement, you become the liable party as surety, okay? That's why it's so important to go read UCC 3-402B, and there's a number of other ones too, but that one's most poignant. There's UCC 3-415 is another good one that you're going to want to put in the old spank bank, so you got that in your head, all right? Let's see. So qualify your endorsement, okay, first and foremost. But there's some things that I've just recently learned that make this even better, because when they're asking for the date of birth, we misconstrue what they're asking for. We miss it by a mile, and in this game, if you miss it by an inch, you just as well have missed it by 10 fucking miles, okay? Because the actual date they're looking for is the date that that commercial entity was registered, okay? So that's the date that the birth certificate U.S. citizen person was manifested into existence. And that is typically 3 to 14 days after you have arrived at your place of nativity, okay? U.S. citizen is literally defined as someone who is a volunteer government employee living in the area of Washington, D.C. or one of its territories, such as Puerto Rico. I understand that that sounds strange, but when you heavily research this topic, that is the secret trap that pulls you into the jurisdiction of tax authorities, police, the UCC, etc. It is the main landmine that you need to learn to quit stepping on. Here's the secret, though. You can use both jurisdictions. You can operate in both realms. You just have to know what you're doing when you do it. And it's all set up for your benefit, okay? You're perceived, presumed, and assumed. Ouch. Boy, I gotta lay off the fucking ho-hos. You're presumed and assumed to be an expert in commerce because you've been doing it your entire life, okay? Executive orders really just apply to government employees. Absolutely correct on that. Now, let's explain to you why, okay? When Congress reconvened under the first executive order under Abraham Lincoln, the Congress had the ability to reconvene under their own authority and chose to reconvene under the executive order, which then and there meant that the president became the commander-in-chief of the largest standing army in the world, okay? military presence or force in the world, and they were the board of directors. They're no longer Congress. When the judiciary sat on their asses and did nothing about that, they then and there became the administrators on behalf of the commander-in-chief of the largest standing military force the world has ever seen. Okay? That's why they are the administrators of the national fucking debt. Period. Okay? So everybody's working for the bankers at this point, since the first executive order, plus the fact that Abraham Lincoln declared war and never did a proclamation to end it. Period. Okay? So you've always been in a time of martial law. They're not law. So the entire country is governed in an entirely illegal, fraudulent way. Nothing you see or hear about is true law. We have not had a single piece of true law passed in ages. I know this might be shocking. I expect you to do your own homework. You actually have to go through an entire process to become a U.S. citizen. That's called the naturalization process, okay? And none of you guys have done it, I fucking guarantee it. Foreign men and women from other countries have probably went through the naturalization process through immigration or whatnot. But there isn't anybody that's been on this land that's ever went through the proper channels to become a U.S. quote-unquote citizen. And you have never done the program, and you shouldn't. So the hilarious aspect of all this is that you are not a U.S. citizen at all, and every time you say you are on forms, you are technically lying. That's correct. You're lying when you say you're a U.S. citizen. And there is no benefit to being a U.S. citizen. You fall underneath some tyrannical shit when you proclaim to be a U.S. citizen. An alien may be admitted to become a citizen of the United States in the following manner and not otherwise. 2 Stat 153 C28 S1 Revised Statute 2165. Therefore, the U.S. citizen residing in one of the states of the Union, remember when I was talking to you about the Union of States? One of the states of the Union are classified as property and franchises of the federal government as an individual entity. Now, this says state of the Union. State of the Union is not to be misconstrued with Union of States. Okay? Union of the States. Are classified as property and franchises of the federal government as an individual entity. Individual entities, again, are not men and women. Wheeling Steel Co. Corp. versus Fox, 298 U.S. 193 80 LED 1143 56 SCT 773. Unless the defendant again is a false and fictitious misnomer. It's a title. Can you be a defendant? Can you be a plaintiff? No, you're a fucking man or a woman, period. Unless the defendant can prove he is not a citizen of the United States, the IRS has the right to inquire and determine a tax liability. U.S. versus Slatter, 545 Fed, SUPP, Superior Court, 179-182, 1982. Well, I got a little hiccup for you here. The IRS is not part of the United States. They're not part of Washington, D.C. The IRS is a single and separate foreign corporation to the United States. All right? The United States government is a foreign corporation with respect to the state. 19 Corpus Juris Secundum, Section 883, also defined in Title 28, 15 U.S.C. 3002. 3002, is it B? A? I forgot. Anyway, needless to say, just go look it up. Cynthia James Miller, U.S. Treasury Disclosure Office, the IRC Internal Revenue Code is not positive law. It is special law applicable to special persons in the United States who choose to make themselves subject to the requirements of a special law in the IRC by entering into an employment agreement with the U.S. government. Did you fill out W-2s and W-4s? Did you fill them out correctly? Well, then you may have been perceived to be a U.S. citizen by your conduct and actions, not restricting your endorsement, not realizing what you're signing. And the other thing is, when you go to become gainfully employed, your employer is actually required to keep the IRC regulations on the wall because it states, in part or in whole, if, and I got to think about this because they word it really funny, like, if it is the desire of the employee, okay, it's not mandatory, If the employee desires to fill out a W-4, a W-2, the employer must provide the document. Nowhere does it say that you must fill out that document in order to be gainfully employed. Okay? The laws of Congress in respect to those matters do not extend into the territorial limits of the state, but only have force in the District of Columbia and other places that are within the exclusive jurisdiction of the national government. Chaha versus U.S. 152 U.S. 211, 1894. Interesting note. Technically, if you have not done the steps to become a U.S. citizen, yet you continue to place that you are or are not, you or your parents are one on documents, this is a penalty and court case to cover that point. So what he's talking about here is the fact that you can't testify for other people. So let's talk about the DS-11 real quick. You're filing for a passport. On that passport application, it asks for mother's name and father's name. And you facetiously and ignorantly, without power of attorney, place their name in there and somehow acquire their social security numbers or the entity, the estate's social security number, and you use that, you have engaged in identity theft. That is actually, you have committed a crime. Okay? That shit isn't for you. You can't testify one way or the other if they're U.S. citizens or if they're not U.S. citizens. You have no fucking firsthand knowledge of any of that shit. Okay? So on the DS-11, I leave that shit blank because I'm not going to falsify a record, right? I'm not going to create something because I believe it to be a fact. It needs to be a fact. And if they don't know what they are, personally, I wouldn't have my folks put anything on the DS-11 at all for any reason. Okay? You can't testify for other people, and you need to be very, very keen on paying attention to the details because the devil is always in the details. So on the DS-11, it tells you that you affirm under the pains and penalties of perjury that everything here is true, correct, and not misleading in any way, shape, or form. You face $1,000 fine and 1 year in jail and a $10,000 fine. Well, you put your parents down. I'll redact that. Maybe not you. Somebody may have the inclination of putting their parents down and getting their social security numbers and birth dates and putting it on this DS-11 form. But effectively what you have done is falsified a record because you have no firsthand perfected knowledge of any of that to be true. Okay? You can only speak about yourself. That's why everybody says this is a road you take alone. Whoever falsely and willfully represents himself to be a citizen of the United States shall be fined under this title or in prison not more than 3 years or both. June 25th, 1948, Chapter 645, 62 Stat, 742, Public Law 103, 322, and Title XXI, so that's 33, subsection 33 16, 18, September 13th, 1994, 108 Stat 2147. So to make a long story short, the beauty of this whole process is that it's already done. No papers to fill out, nothing to do. You're already done. Wasn't that easy? The W-4, W-9, and other tax forms have literally zero repercussions for entirely avoiding filing them or filling them out and signing them. Look it up if you don't believe me. Once they are filled out and signed, you are now obligated unless you file a revocation of election. There are zero penalties for never submitting these forms. Do a little research. It is also not required to give any employer your social security number. Again, there's an error in this. It is not your social fucking security number. It belongs to the estate. You are the beneficiary of it. You are not the owner of the social security number. And here's how we prove that. Just reasonable deduction of thought process here, okay? Did you create it? No, you didn't. Did you sign the original application? No, you didn't. It ain't fucking yours, all right? It's that simple. It's not yours. It belongs to the estate. You are merely a beneficiary of that social security number. And you have to understand why that social security number has even been implemented by the IMF. Because as I stated earlier, the Social Security Administration is a subsidiary corporation of the International Monetary Fund, okay? Period. Everybody has this false misconception that the only ones that can create credits into the account, credits on account into thin air, are in fact the centralized banking system. Well, the IMF can also create its own credits on account, okay? So If they can do it, you can do it, okay? If the Federal Reserve, which is privately owned, it's only federal by name and name alone, so it just simulates that it's federal, and they can create credit out of thin air. Guess what? You have the fucking ability to do. You have the ability to create promissory notes too. You have the ability to create credit out of nothing, all right? Because the whole system is based upon promises and pledges that will be paid sometime in the future. Some people argue Jesus has already paid for those, right? Other people say that the futures market proves that they borrowed your essence, your energy before you were even conceived. So they owe you. I can see that being logical as well. It is not illegal to simply never fill out these forms in the first place, but it is illegal to stop paying once you have already signed them without doing a revocation of election, because once you sign them, you are willingly contracted, knowingly, willingly, and intentionally. You have made a decision to contract with them, okay? And now you're on the hook. If you didn't qualify your endorsement. Qualify your endorsement, you almost have nothing to worry about qualifying your endorsement, restricting your endorsement. I actually run my own payroll, and I use a large payroll company. When verifying documents for a new hire, just a passport alone is good enough to approve them. A social security number is not required. Not only is a passport good enough, but if you go to get a job and they're telling you they won't hire you because you won't provide them a social security number, it is very clear that if they're asking for a social security number, they have to provide for you statutorily why they want it. They have to prove to you that they're entitled to it. Okay. First of all, it's not your number to give out. If you read the back of the Social Security card, it clearly tells you that it doesn't fucking belong to you. So, and it's not just the back of the Social Security card, it's the back of the index card that comes with the Social Security card still attached. If you've never attached it, flip it over, read it, and you'll see what I'm talking about. So what they effectively end up doing by failing to hire you because you don't provide a social security number is a form of discrimination. Okay, it also violates Title 15, subsection 1, subpart 1, interference with trade and commerce. All right, a man is worthy of his hire, and a man doesn't need a piece of plastic or a number in order to provide a good day's work. The other misnomer that's out there is that the fact that you earn an income. You don't earn an income. You're engaged in even exchange and fair trade. My time for something that I value, whether that come in Federal Reserve notes or a form of a check or whatever, doesn't matter. That's an even exchange and fair trade. There is no income that is derived from that. An income is if I buy a cell phone for $5 and I sell it for $20, I have generated an income of $15, and there's an income tax that comes with that. But as far as outsourcing my labor for an even exchange and fair trade of what I perceive to be value, whether it be a dozen eggs or 5 FRN notes, it doesn't fucking make a difference. That's an even exchange and fair trade, and there is no income. There's no capital gains on my labor. It's an even exchange and fair trade, all right? So there's another reason that you don't have to give them a social security number in order to acquire a job. You can simply tell your employer that they have no obligation to withhold for the government, and that your status in terms of taxes is simply between you and your government. Withholding for the government is a tacit consent that you are a government employee by the law, or there's one other way. You don't have to necessarily be a government employee. You can volunteer. You can volunteer. It's a gratuitous thing. I'm just gifting it away. You know, there's 9 classes to the tax code. There's nine different classes, I believe there are, if my recollection serves me correctly. So there's the class 2 and the class 5 that are the most commonly used amongst common men. The gift and estate tax, so on and so forth. So when we think about this for a second, if you're just gratuitously gifting it away and equity does not aid a volunteer, when you finally figure all this shit out and you come back whining and crying, guess who doesn't get reimbursed? It was a gift. You gifted it. It's that simple. All right. You can even whip up an affidavit notarized stating such and give it to them if they are trepidatious. But again, your tacit consent that you are a U.S. citizen, and thus under tax law is confirmed when you fill out and sign these forms. Again, restrict your endorsement. How do you restrict your endorsement? Authorized representative, okay? Then check out UCC 415, I believe it is. That goes even further into expanding upon how you can restrict your endorsement. And you'll notice quotation marks when you read UCC 3-402B or B2. When you read it, you'll notice the quotation marks. Pay peculiar attention to the quotation marks. They're always giving you the fucking answer and highlighting it, how you should do something, all right? So when you read UCC 3-402B2 or B, and then you read UCC 3-415, look for the quotation marks. They give you the fucking words if you use them. I don't necessarily use the UCC and articulate UCC-3-402. I don't necessarily do that. What I do is I take the words verbatim, and then I use Jesus's little trick. Are not your laws the same as my heavenly Father's? See how it gets them? And they go back and they go, oh, where'd you get that? Well, if you must know, I think your laws state the same. I'm not using your shit, okay? You can't just take those words and make it so nobody else can fucking use them. So I'm not using your code, your copywritten, private material bullshit, although it seems to me that your laws are the same as my fucking father's. How's that work for you? All right. Taxes, by definition, are a contribution imposed, not mandatory, ladies and gentlemen. And mandatory is even a piss poor word for it. It's not law. They can't force you to do it. I have a 26-page document with actual court cases where they explain how how state nationals, due to them being technically a non-resident alien to the federal government, have no tax burdens. You can message me for that documentation. There's a totally legal, lawful process that you can go through called a revocation of election, whereby you have your master tax file changed from taxpayer to non-taxpayer. This removes your volunteer employee status with the government. Again, it's not your volunteer status. It's the entity. It's the estate status. It's not your status. It's the status of the fucking estate. You can alter these things because you're the beneficiary, but on the back side of that, you can wear multiple hats. You can be the trustee. You can be the entitlement holder. You can come in all these different avenues and aspects, but you have to gain the acquired knowledge before you do it, or you can get yourself in trouble. Qualifying your endorsement is probably the best thing you could ever do for yourself. You can appoint trustees, securities intermediaries, fiduciaries. That's what the Form 56 and Form 56F are about, ladies and gentlemen. All right? And again, you're not an employee. You might be acting in the capacity of an employee by signing something ignorantly without doing your due diligence, but you will forever and for always be a man, first and foremost, period. They can't change your they can't change what the Heavenly Father created you to be, because He knew you long before you were even on this earth. They don't have the authority to change who you are or what you are, okay? So by your actions, they're saying, well, you act in a certain capacity, so we're going to treat you that way until you show us otherwise. That's basically what's happening, okay? And in their court system, in admiralty, they're allowed to presume and assume. That Social Security number, first of all, people don't even get paid how they think they get paid. The Social Security number is actually a vessel, okay? And you're giving them that Social Security number, and they're charging up that vessel for 75 years. Whether you're gainfully employed at that job or not, they have charged it up for 75 years in advance. Don't believe me? Fill out a W-4, figure out what they've calculated to pay you for an hour, and do the math and calculate it for 75 years in advance, and then submit a W-4 stating, don't pay me X amount of dollars, whatever that grand total is for 75 years, okay? And you will find that nobody's going to bother you about that. The IRS isn't going to bother you about it, because that's in fact what they've done with that Social Security account number. They have charged it up for 75 years in the future, okay? Whether you work there or don't work there, it doesn't fucking matter, okay? They've charged it up. And then they invite you back onto that vessel as a ship deckhand. So you get the shit into the stick and don't even realize that you funded the whole fucking thing. That is why Henry Ford said it best. He said if the American people truly understood the way the banking system works, I wouldn't have one man standing on my assembly line tomorrow. They all pay for themselves to be there. They all pay their own wages through being the beneficiary of that Social Security, that constructive trust that was manifested after 1933 due to 1921, the House Township Maternity Ward Act, the 1913 Federal Reserve Banking Act, and we can just keep going back all the way to 1966, down to 1302, so on and so forth, okay? It's all just a banking deal. Every country has a republic. Every fucking country. There's a Republic of China. There's a Republic of Ukraine. There's a Republic of Russia. There's a Republic of fucking Texas, for fuck's sake. So this whole, we're the only ones in the world that have a republic, we're the only ones, it's all cockamamie horseshit, because the very definition of a constitution is a charter for banking, for commercial purposes. The East Indian Trading Company, it was a commercial fucking venture and charter. Okay, it's the law of commerce, the law of merchants. Before the UCC came along, everybody was speaking about the law of merchants. Okay, the law of mercantile. It's commerce. The very definition of constitutor is, in fact, to roll debt from one entity to another. So under the Reconstruction Act, what they did was they created another constitution that was similar, but as we know, similar is not same, and they reconstituted the debt from one entity to the new constitution, the new corporate charter. That's what they did. And under the banking laws, there's a rule of 70. Every 70 years, mathematically, there's an equation that every 70 years, the debt doubles. So the banking crisis that happened in 1908 is the same banking crisis to a fucking identical T that happened in 2008. Okay? So in 1907, 1908, they had a bank crisis. Same thing. It's a mirror image of each other from 2008 to 1908. If you splice them together and you look at them analytically, they're the same fucking thing. So naturally, what happened after 1908? We had the banking crash in 1929. Well, here we are in 2022 now, okay? And the banking crisis happened in 1908. How close are we to an economic collapse and a repeat? Because history repeats itself. This is just a vicious cycle of passing debt. The only difference that I've noticed thus far is that I believe the United States is now in liquidation. Liquidation how? Well, when they were rolling over the debt in years past, they just continued to reconstitute it. But this time, we don't hear anything about reorganization or a new constitution, do we? So what are they doing? Liquidation of the assets? And who does the national debt belong to anyway? Have you ever stopped to wonder who all this energy is owed to? It's actually owed to you, okay? The national debt belongs to the people in every country. And these people, the governments, the constructs, the trusts that were manifested have been bolstered by people who have made wise, sound business decisions. Every county is in the black. None of them are in the red. If you go look at the CAFR report, you will quickly see every county is in the black. But why is it that they perpetuated all these county board meetings that they're in the red? We're in the red, we're in the red, we're behind. We need more money. We don't have enough money to fund the local ambulance anymore. We don't have enough to support the fire department anymore. We don't have enough. The reason they're telling you that is because they're doing projections 50 years into the future using calculations based upon inflation. From the day a fiat currency is created, it is at its strongest. The first day it's ever introduced into an economy, it has its most buying power. Fiat currency, by design, is designed to implode and loses its buying power over time due to the manipulation of the fiat currency. Rome was a fine example of that, and it's never fucking changed. It's the same banking racketeering scheme from day one. It's why they don't want to go to precious metals, because you can't charge interest on something that only a finite amount exists within the world, right? But something like fiat, you can inflate, you can deflate, you can manipulate the market, you can control it, you can control the interest rates and everything else. You can't do that with gold and silver. There's only as much gold as there is in the world, and you can't lend gold and expect to get more gold back upon a return of your investment, because there's only as much that really fucking exists. That's one of the reasons they don't like Iran. Iran's banking policies, they don't believe in interest. That's the only way that bankers thrive, is because they rely on your life source energy is the interest. The ones and zeros, let me just put it this way. Less than 1/8 of the currency of the world is actually physically tangible and printed into existence. Less than 1/8 out of $30 trillion the United States is allegedly in debt. Less than 1/8 of it is actually printed into existence. And that number might even be smaller at this point because the national debt has skyrocketed allegedly, right? So if it's not physically tangible, where is it? It's ones and zeros on a fucking ledger, ladies and gentlemen. A digital ledger at this point. It doesn't exist. It, for all intents and purposes, is a fucking illusion. But it is still owed to the people of this great land. So when you're paying your property tax, what you're actually doing is paying rent as a tenant for the owner, which is really fucking you. It's you. You're the owner. Okay? You're the caretaker of it. So anyway, with that said, I love you guys. I hope this was informative and helped you out a little bit. I come across this guy's little tutorial that he put together, and I like it, but I wanted to point out some things in it as well. So it's on my Facebook wall. It's number 1 and 2. If you go through my Facebook wall, you'll see it. There's more stuff in there that I think is very enlightening and productive, but there's some things in here that obviously I don't agree with, and I just wanted to express that to you guys. So we'll see you guys on March 12th for the class on CPS, and we got to put an end to these people stealing people's offspring. Blatant theft, robbery of property, which is a trespass causing a harm to men and women throughout the United States of America, all right, throughout this land. And we got to stand up and put our boot up their ass. They are trafficking our children. They are selling them for fucking profit. And they are doing it under the guise that it's for the best interest of the offspring, which is bullshit, okay? Because they're doing it to receive federal grant money, which is in fact human trafficking. That's why they're doing it. It's not the best interest of the child. I don't buy that for a fucking minute. Just like we wouldn't have all these courts because there aren't enough criminals to support these courts, okay? There aren't enough criminals to support these courts, all right? Statutes, codes, city ordinances, rules, and regulations do not apply to I as a man, okay? There are times that I agree with certain statutes. For example, murder. It's unlawful and it absolutely happens to be illegal as well. I agree with the statutory code at that point because it's in harmony with natural law, God's law. And if you read the UCC in the very beginning, it tells you that if the UCC is not in harmony with natural law, God's law, then it is wholly void. Love you guys. Thanks for joining me. We'll talk to you real soon.